Cool. Thanks a lot, Spencer. So yeah, we're going to talk about socializing media, and I think one of the most interesting things going on, and it was touched on by Nikesh last night, which was this idea that the internet in its first iteration, there was that New Yorker cartoon on the internet, "No one knows you're a dog," and nowadays that's not true because there's so much more benefits to being social and being connected. And I think Mark Zuckerberg put it better. The very simple observation that things are a lot better when you do them with friends. And I think that's been sort of the secret of Facebook's success. And I think the big challenge is how can various industries, including publishing and brands, actually catch on to that? How can they socialize their businesses like we've seen, for instance, Zynga do to gaming, which is absolutely amazing. It's the kind of stuff we're going to touch on here. So I'm just going to introduce really quickly Tobias Bauckhage. Tobias is the CEO of Moviepilot, which is a movie recommendation engine. That's the way I understand it. Next, Reggie Bradford. Reggie is the CEO of Vitrue. Vitrue basically helps brands figure out their Facebook strategies, more or less. Right? Christian Hernandez. Christian is Director of Platform Partnerships at Facebook, which I'm sure we all know. Lyle Fong. Lyle is the Chief Strategist at Lithium, which helps both brands and publishers figure out their community strategy. And last, but certainly not least, is Avi Savar, who is the CEO of Big Fuel, which is a social agency. So let's start with this idea of the role of social. Like, are we moving into an era where there's a social operating system and all industries and businesses have to figure out how they operate on top of it? Let's just start. Reggie, you want to start on that?
Yeah, I'll start. We have basically a software company that helps marketers on-ramp onto Facebook and other social networks. But I've been saying for a couple years now, I think there's been three big revolutions in the application development market. If you look at the introduction of the PC in the late 80s, and then the introduction of the internet in the 90s, and then all the applications and services that were built on top of that. And I think fundamentally in the last 3 years we've seen Facebook become, not because Christian's sitting here, but the operating system of the internet, of the social internet. And so I think as you think about that premise, and not that I don't think Facebook is the only game in town, I think the premise is that Facebook is connecting the world, and as any marketer, whether you're a publisher or a media company or a brand marketer, you have to recognize that you need to have that hub of your hub and spoke social media strategy, and you need to create that connection with your consumers as they spend more time on that operating system.
So, Avi, I want to pick up on that. And are we moving from the era, we think about Google pretty much dominated, the initial era of discovery of content when it was a page-based internet. Mm-hmm. Are we moving to an era of a people-based internet where Facebook is playing that sort of gatekeeper role that Google had played?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yes, we are moving 100% to a more socially connected world. I think that's obvious. To me, Facebook, although they're not the only game in town, certainly the most dominant. I look at Facebook almost like dial tone, right? I mean, it's part of the fabric of our life, and how we use it, in whether you're a brand or a publisher or a consumer, is going to vary based on what you want to do and who you want to pick up the phone and call, and how you choose to engage and who you choose to engage with. So I think it is it's going to become certainly a day-to-day, as it has, part of our ongoing communications. And I think there are opportunities certainly for brands to leverage the platform, but I don't think it's the only thing. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's not mutually exclusive. It's not, you still have to do your search optimization. You still have to be findable. You still have to be searchable, and then you still have to have a presence on Facebook by which to connect with your end consumer or your audience, or kind of, I always call it like kind of different horses for different courses. There's different places that you can engage and different ways for you to connect. It's not just TV, it's not just search, it's not just Facebook, but it's kind of a holistic approach to all of it. I think the key factor that we believe is that by putting the kind of customer, the consumer, the audience person at the center of the plan, that by default puts social at the center, right? You have to ultimately build your plan around who your customer is or who your audience is.
And where they are.
And where they are.
Right.
And so I think we are moving to a more socially dominated environment just by the fact that by putting the consumer at the center, you by default have to put social at the center.
Okay. So Christian, all these people are saying such great things about your company. But what's interesting to me is if you take everything that Avi said, and if we rewound like 10 years ago and substitute AOL in for Facebook, I think everything would actually hold true. And there is some people who would say, and I've been told it, that Facebook is the new AOL. Do you think that there's any, in that before you had brands and you had publishers basically creating things within the AOL walled garden, and now it seems like they're doing the same thing all over again. Is there any sort of validity to that comparison?
I think not, but first of all,
Carriage fees coming?
first of all, the notion of identity. So AOL was built on this fake handle of who you portray yourself to be. So, Mom Soccer 1975, which is very different from the real me that I have on Facebook. Secondly, the portal mode was around building content and assuming people would come, where we don't have any content. We don't build portals. We actually just let people share. So your friend shares the content, which leads to discovery, which leads to consumption. So if you think about AOL is trying to bring everybody into a hub, we're actually simply the pipe through which the content flows. And the way that the content flows is because the real identity, your real friend, led you to discover that piece of music or to play that game or to actually listen to that song.
Mm-hmm. But increasingly, they're doing all this within Facebook. Before, you guys were all sending. It's kind of like Google was always sending things. And I say as like a publisher, I'm always happy to get traffic and everything like this. But when we're talking about brands and increasingly publishers, basically driving their customer base to Facebook. And if you think about like how AOL used to be the keyword, and now we're seeing, the brand page, fan us on Facebook and stuff like that.
Can I?
Of course.
I don't want to. I think there's more people on Facebook today than there was on the entire internet in 2004. So I think the comparisons of AOL, which was a dial-up service for 25 or 30 million people at its peak, that Facebook's they are there's everybody's connecting through Facebook to get to the internet. So I don't think I think now how Facebook behaves going forward, are they really a platform and do they allow third parties to be able to truly be able to integrate and continue to flourish and be successful? If they continue that philosophy, which I fully expect they will, then I think that's a very different philosophy than AOL had with the carriage fees and some of the other walled garden features.
It's open versus closed.
Yeah. So Lyle, do you want to talk a little bit about, is there any risk of brands and publishers putting too many eggs in the Facebook basket?
Well, I think the fundamental thing is that especially you think about the media industry, a lot of folks said, well, you know what, as we moved all of our traditional media to online and then seeing the revenues drop and seeing the engagement, not really being there, I think what Facebook sets is a really minimum bar that companies have to break. Meaning, hey, you know what, if I can't figure out how to get my content to really get eyeballs and get people to come back on a regular basis, then you know what, at least Facebook provides me with a huge amount of reach. So yeah, I should do that. But I think the challenge that a lot of companies are facing is that if you just put all of your eggs in Facebook, you lose control a lot of the customer experience. Ultimately, you lose control of a lot of the content. Some of the data may not even be yours anymore. And so I think, as the rest of the panelists have been saying, it's got to be a two-way strategy. And in the end, it doesn't mean that companies shouldn't do something on Facebook, but at the same time, putting everything on Facebook is just too risky.
Yeah.
Right.
Just to make a point on your earlier question,
yeah.
I don't think that the answer is lead it all to Facebook, but actually lead it with Facebook. So from our perspective, if you land on the Yahoo News site and you log on with your Facebook identity, like 2 million people have done in the last month, you're actually there with your friends consuming content on the Yahoo site. Mm-hmm. So the idea is to become the social platform that permeates the web rather than actually being only the destination.
Yeah. Do you think the experience of Zynga is instructive for other media businesses in general? Because Zynga built most of their entire business on top of Facebook. And now they're diversifying because I think they saw some risk in that. But do you think that the experience of Zynga that media companies can learn from it?
Zynga was really good at two things. One, understanding that people were at the center, so you were actually challenging your real friends. And two, massive amount of data crunching to understand the triggers that actually would let people to monetize. I always joke that Zynga was more of a database analysis company than a gaming company that happened to build games on top of the data. So from the media perspective, let's look more at Spotify, who actually believed that people were going to lead you to discover content and music, and we're actually probably the first guys to bet on it. And because of that, you've seen a fair amount of success as you discover music based on your friend, the house music specialist, rather than a radio station telling you what to listen to.
Yeah. Tobias, I mean, how do you advise clients to think about is it a Facebook strategy plus an open web strategy, or how do they get them? Because it seems right now that oftentimes they're more separate than together.
Well, first of all, let's make the difference between, you said Google and search, and Facebook. If we look at Google, great, they did disrupt so many different industries. There's so many things we had to do before that now are obsolete. So we had to call a hotline number to get the latest currency exchange rate. We had to directories to look up these things, telephone books, yellow pages, all these things. Great. It's all disrupted, great solution. But have you ever seen a brand, and that's what we're talking about here, have you ever seen a brand that was built on one of those means? Have you ever seen a brand that was built on a telephone book? I think that is the big change, and that's also what we're talking here about. Facebook, if you want to build a brand on a good product, you have to do great storytelling and have images and make this compelling and create a message. You have to reach out to the core target group and create a desire, and you need something like a social echo chamber to amplify this desire among a bigger target group. So if you look at Facebook, storytelling, images, not there yet, but identifying core target groups, that's a revolution. That is not well done. Google cannot do that. So that's a real revolution. Getting the message across, still not very simple on Facebook. And third one, definitely strong, that's the echo chamber. So that's suddenly, first movers and early adopters bring in their desire, and this is amplified in a big amplitude via the social graph. Mm-hmm. So I think that is important. So if you want to optimize search, go to Google. If you want to create brands, you need these three things. And unless the two of them are provided by Facebook. So I think that is, for this use case and what we want to do, that's a very strong
So that's an interesting point, because, Google dominated a direct response internet. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, you're talking about harvesting demand. People are raising their hands, and they're meeting that with relevant content. I wonder whether or not, there's often a discussion about where the brand dollars are online. There's a big gap between time spent, obviously, and the percentage of brand budgets online. Reggie, is this the sort of next phase for bringing brands online in a real way?
I think this has the best chance to bring those dollars, because I think 80 to 90% of consumers today buy products and services based upon a recommendation from a peer or friend. And within the social graph, especially within Facebook, but also Twitter and YouTube and other platforms, that's the biggest opportunity the marketer has, not just to influence the consumer, but the consumer and their friends in that relationship to be able to drive purchase intent in a consumer relationship. And not to point on someone in the audience, but Lucas Watson, who's in the first row, who's with YouTube now, but he was with P&G. And not to paraphrase, but I know P&G has made a big investment into Facebook and other social platforms because they want to have a direct relationship. Their brands want to have a direct relationship with consumers. And, brand page is just a facilitator, but the real opportunity is, I don't think that they want Walmart to be the face of Tide. They want to have that direct connection with their core consumers, and that's what the opportunity is. And again, it's not just about Facebook. I think people have excitement about other platforms too that I think are good for the entire ecosystem, including Google+, Twitter. It's all about how do marketers create those direct connections with their core consumers.
Yeah. So, Avi, you want to talk about that, about it not being just Facebook? Because I think oftentimes when we talk about social media, it's easy to get lost in the numbers. The numbers are the numbers. 800 million is a lot. Yeah. And, Dick Costello was up here earlier. Twitter's much smaller. Are we going to see, we think about like sort of broadcast TV world where we had a few big networks. Are we going to have multiple big scaled platforms? Because right now, it doesn't seem like there are.
No, look, I can speak from kind of a brand perspective, because at Big Fuel, we work with and represent brands, and I know there's a lot of publishing and media in the room, but our job is really to build a brand network, right? Ultimately, if you look at Facebook as a platform, Twitter as a platform, YouTube as a platform, these are all channels, right? They're channels that individual brands have opportunities to create presences on, right? So those are owned media channels. Those owned media channels collectively, we kind of work it into a model around building a network of owned channels. So, we work with General Motors, we work with T-Mobile, we work with a number of large brands. Our job is to build individual presences and grow those own channels to ultimately ladder up to something bigger, right? And that is how kind of a social strategy takes shape. And so our job is to, and you talk about, the question was based around kind of what are the different platforms and how do they work. The reality is there isn't just one place, because you have to take paid, earned, and owned and create it's like a full, I call it the circle of life, right? You got, it starts with paid media, where brands get the opportunity to write a check, deliver their message. Whatever their message, whatever they want to say, they have the opportunity to say it, okay? Then through earned media, right, hopefully you get the consumers to talk to each other about the brand, right? So first it starts with the brand says something, then hopefully it gets people to talk to other people about the brand. And then if you get lucky and you do it well, which some brands do and some brands don't, then you get a few people who raise their hand and they end up going to a channel and they become a fan or a friend or a follower or a subscriber, and you start building your own channels. So at the end of the day, it's not just about Facebook, it's not just about YouTube, it's not just about search, it's about how all these things work together from a paid, earned, and owned perspective, and that's how you create media efficiency, right? Our job as a social agency is, yes, to create kind of scalable buzz and hopefully a few breakout hits, from a content perspective. But the way that we prove ROI more than anything else is by creating efficiency around media dollars. So we ladder up to big media tentpoles, big cultural events that resonate with consumers, that get people talking, and by kind of leveraging those paid media dollars to drive earned media and ultimately build owned media, you now have a kind of a cohesive plan around how to live in all these different platforms.
Well, but let me just one thing, because using the word channel, and I think that is one thing that leaves out one great revolution that Facebook is, which is it's not a channel, it's not a supply-driven kind of way you push your message into different channels.
Yeah, well, Facebook is a platform. The T-Mobile page is a channel for T-Mobile, right? And ultimately how you leverage that channel or what content exists on that channel should not just live there, but it should live in multiple places. So we may create, content that we post to Facebook, we tweet through Twitter, that ultimately lives on YouTube, but then also syndicates out through the blogosphere. So, in a content-driven environment, and we firmly believe that content is what drives conversation, right, in the social space. So at the end of the day, and it's the more engaging the content is, the more valuable it becomes. The more engaging the content is, the more of the more you can leverage it as a commodity in the marketplace to ultimately get syndication and distribution outside of your own channels. So it is very much a publishing mindset when it comes down to it, because you're creating content to ultimately drive conversation, to build your own properties, but then you also take that content and you're able to syndicate it out in order to drive more earned value.
No question about that, but it takes, the first step, and Reggie said that core audience or core target, core customers. This is the real step where Facebook comes in. It's different to 10 years ago. This early kind of dynamics, how to build the first advocates for your product. This is the real revolution I'm talking about. It's definitely also reach, but this is not so different than AOL.
Right.
So the real difference is that you can identify the most important core users. We do this for the movie studios, and the studios have this very small kind of window where they bring in their movies to the box office, and it has to work on the first weekend. If you're not successful in the first weekend, you're done. So this dynamics of from the first rumor to actually hitting the screen. That dynamic, this is the real power of Facebook, I see, besides reach, is to work with this, have data, to build it up, as you said, build audiences, and then you reach a channel. And
Absolutely. You have, the makeup of an audience is, I find kind of fascinating, because when you work with brands, they're all consumed by number of followers, number of fans, number of likes, which is, pardon my French, complete bullshit, right? At the end of the day, no two fans are created equally, and I could make an argument that 1,000 advocates who are diehard advocates are worth more than 10,000 fans, and But at the end of the day, the problem with brands is they have to justify their existence to their bosses. So you have brand managers who need to quantify their existence. And so the challenge is to create scale, but also understand the dynamics of your audience so that you can leverage it from an advocate perspective.
I mean,
So,
that's
you know,
fundamentally-
that's the hardest part of
But that's the
working with brands.
Well, that's
The
the
best news about Facebook, though.
Yeah.
I mean, that is like
Exactly.
a big challenge, which is why ultimately, we don't believe that, putting all your eggs in just Facebook is sufficient, right? I mean, as you said, I mean, the reason why a lot of brands pay attention to that is because, well, they have, such great reach, and it's like easy to just, spend a lot of money in that one place. But if you look at where the people are for a brand, I mean, if you look at a company like Sephora and where their fanatical customers are, actually a lot of them are on YouTube, doing beauty blogs and videos for, how to apply makeup and things like this.
Which
if you
gets
look
shared
at
on Facebook.
Yeah, which then they show on Facebook, right? And so then, but the point is, like, if you're into watches, you're into, you're going to certain places to talk about that. If you're really trying to, if you're Audi and you're trying to find the most hardcore, car enthusiasts, you're finding them on Edmunds Talk or other places like that. The people, there are other, if you look at a brand and say, who are the influencers and the advocates that I want to reach? Yeah, of course, there's a lot of people on Facebook too, but then you can't ignore the fact that people are also congregating in other places, and that's the bigger challenge.
Which is
I
why I
wanna-
said earlier, it's not to, it's with, right? So it's if you land on Edmunds and you logged in with Facebook and your friends are there, you discover that this friend of yours is actually a watch enthusiast as well, and yet you had no idea. You create this notion of like micro communities of passions, but actually this notion of real identity actually makes that much clingier, if we can say that. I mean, you actually have a much deeper emotional attachment to the fact that you're discussing, in the case of moms, Pampers with your best friends.
But there is a reason not to have always force real identity. I mean, as just one example, Sephora found that their most passionate customers, the people that have spent the most money with them, are not actually the ones that you would normally imagine. The women living in New York or Paris. Actually, their most passionate consumers were some of these women in the Midwest. They were in the 40s and 50s. And you know what? Actually, like, they know everything about beauty and they know how to do all this kind of stuff. But yet, if they were to put their real name in their real picture, they would not, they would feel odd about that. And so hiding behind that alternate persona gives them freedom of expression that they otherwise wouldn't have gotten.
Yeah. Reggie, you want to just go back to something that Avi mentioned, and he was talking about the importance of that mix between paid, owned, and earned. And I was interested that you started with paid, and I wouldn't have thought that. I would have thought
Absolutely.
it starts with owned, actually, not
well,
paid.
look, owned is, from our perspective, kind of the holy grail, because that's something that's an asset. It's something that's we help build an asset for brands. But the fact of the matter is, to generate scale, you need to leverage paid.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
I mean, there's
Reggie, I
no
just
question
want
about
to,
that.
is that, because it seems to me in this sort of social world compared to, a page-based content, professionally content world, the role of paid advertising is actually lower than it is in traditional digital media. Is that fair?
I mean, I would probably differ a little bit. I mean, I would probably start with owned, and you have to create a socially engaging brand that people want to interact with, at the start, and a socially engaging presence. And absolutely, the media is a. I mean, there's two ways to create that brush fire, and I think on Facebook, from my perspective, is through the news feed. Right, there's 110 times engagement, in that news feed where consumers are interacting with their friends, and if you're lucky enough as a brand, you're able to get consumers to engage with their brand and like, comment, share. That's where you're going to show up, and then increasingly through sponsored stories, which is a form of creating your post that either you create as a brand or consumers could create on your behalf, and then using paid media to amplify that. I think that's the magic formula that I think we're seeing that brands are using to create that paid
Brands and
that
Zynga and
automated network.
Like it's actually, I think the beauty is the same strategy that Zynga uses. They create a new game. Unless you tell people it's there, nobody's going to come. So they do actually use us as an advertising platform. And then once your friend starts playing, then actually the virality kicks in. Your friend just beat you, your friend just played, your friend just won something through sponsor stories. So yeah, have your strategy ready to go to actually know how to talk to the users, then kind of tell them that you're there so they go to the page or to the app, and then amplify it with this beautiful sponsor story product where your friend is the one nudging you to go there.
Yeah.
But and I agree with that, and they work together because you create an audience on Facebook, and then you post, and you're generally gonna, if you're driving the right engagement, you're gonna get through to 20% of your fans on any given post. That's free, essentially free advertising, free engagement that you're getting with your consumers.
So
It's
Christian,
really
let's talk about that. I mean, there's a lot that, brands on the platform get for free. And I wonder, Dick Costello this morning said something very interesting. He said the problem with digital advertising has been super low engagement rates. I mean, the banner ad engagement rates, which has been around the click, and we can argue about whether or not that's the right metric, are super, super low. And if you look at the most successful internet advertising form, it's been search advertising, because it was unique to the medium. Where do you think you guys and just social platforms in general are to finding the right fit for an advertising unit or experience? Like, where's the AdWords of social?
And so if you asked me a question a year ago, it would have been a bit hard to quantify. Actually, and a lot of the guys in the panel were making a fair amount of money actually consulting companies on this. And usually the brand conversation went something on the lines of, we tried Facebook, we're not going to use it. CPC rates are much higher on Google. And they were kind of missing the point. Each click on the ad led to 4 other stories that were being generated. Or same thing with pages, where everybody was focused on what I call page offs. I have more fans than my competitor. Great, fantastic, I'll take the check, thank you very much. But then we added a second metric recently that is people talking about. And I think that's the more important metric. If you have a passionate enough audience, they're going to do the amplification for you. Mm-hmm. And so what we need to do is build a simple kind of dashboard so that marketers can see community, conversation, and then viral distribution. Yeah. So that they actually realize the value. So when they go to the CMO, they say, yes, we have 1 million people, but more interestingly, 10,000 talked about it last week, and we tracked them down to our site, and 1,000 converted and bought. Yeah.
So is it just a matter of analytics? I mean, Carolyn Everson, the head of ad sales at Facebook, has said that you guys are 1% there with advertising. Maybe now you're like 4 since she said it. But
1.1.
What's that?
1.1, I'd say.
1.1. So what is the rest of it? I mean, where are you now? Because I mean, I think about, Tobias mentioned building brands and stuff like this. I think a lot of CMOs would look at the type of advertising that they can do on Facebook and be like, yeah, that's not how brands are built.
Yeah, and I think it's an ad product, and actually it's the story around the platform. We're talking about it before that, outside that, Pages was like brand version 1.0 on top of Facebook. And the way you actually ran that is you ran like ads on top of the platform. The next evolution is this beautiful canvas that we give you in which you can create fairly immersive experiences. People are creating shops on top of Facebook. People are creating, selling digital content on top of Facebook. How do you teach the average brand to create a compelling experience that's relevant to what they're doing? I think American Express did a brilliant thing around tying coupons to Amex cardholders on Facebook. You linked your Facebook identity with the Amex card, and they know who you are, and they know what you've bought before, so they're the best person that can actually serve you an ad through my platform. So the next evolution is going to be teaching brands how to leverage this platform to build social experiences like a Zynga type, not necessarily a game, but actually something that's relevant to the brand. And so we talk a lot about how this ecosystem of the partners like Vitrue and others can actually help brands understand this, how they can help a publicist or WPP build these experiences. And then we have to figure out what the premium ad unit is that makes it compelling so that when a movie is launching, you get to watch a preview, but more interestingly, you actually share it with 20 of your friends.
I think to get a bigger share of that chunk of that branding advertising budget, I think 2 things have to happen. Facebook has to offer more compelling limitations, have to be open a little bit more so that there are more tools that you can actually create compelling stories and reach, really touch and create desire. And the second thing is, and this is why we're all sitting here, is basically that there's a new breed of agencies or intermediaries that can work with these limitations and understand what the power is to create those stories and to create compelling messages. And then, suddenly, probably in the next years, some of those formats will work so good that this can beat television or something else.
Okay. I want to get to audience questions, but first, I warned these guys I was going to do a little game of word association. And I didn't warn them what there was going to be. So I'm going to start with Avi.
Great.
Since we've been talking about it a lot, and just please give me like 2 sentences, enough to fill a tweet, so or a Facebook status update. Facebook's biggest competitor.
Facebook's biggest competitor, Google.
All right, that's short and sweet. I like it. All right, Lyle, I'm going to go with you. Prospects for Twitter's ad model.
Prospects for Twitter's ad model.
I really didn't prepare them, as you can see.
Yeah, I know that it's doing well. Other than that, I think that, and if you give me like a 2-second longer to answer this question, I'll say I think it's the line between earned and paid is blurring, and there's better ways to do it than traditional ad models.
Christian, Google Plus.
I have an account.
Nothing more?
Haven't used it in a while.
Zinger. Reggie, something we've talked about some over the years. The value of a Facebook like.
Misunderstood.
All right, one more sentence.
Increasing.
Increasing, interesting. Tobias, biggest mistake brands make in social media?
To not start conversations and dialogue and see this as a relationship to their customers.
Okay.